Hi, I'm Nathanael Mehrens, and this is my fantasy funeral.
Imagine you are dead, but you get to design your own funeral. What songs will be played? Who will deliver your eulogy? And where will your remains rest forevermore? This is the scenario presented to my guest today. I'm Ryan Breegle, and you're listening to my fantasy funeral. My guest today is a beverage inventor and entrepreneur that believed there could be a way to make coffee more refreshing. Even in today's world of frappuccinos and cold brew, he felt that delicious caffeinated beverages could go one step further, and he was right. It was while working for local cafe CREMA that he first developed a type of coffee drink that was entirely new to Nashville, perhaps new to the coffee world altogether: coffee soda. He named this concoction Matchless Soda, and now as the beverage director for Nashville's Stay Golden Cafes, he is responsible for introducing the bright and fizzy drink to new coffee lovers every day. He also participates in barista competitions, having placed fourth in the National United States Coffee and Good Spirits Championship held in Kansas City this past March. Yes, other companies have gone on to create their own coffee sodas, but just like the name my guest wisely gave to his invention, it seems there is no match. He is Nathanael Mehrens. Hello, Nathanael.
Hi.
Welcome to my fantasy funeral.
Thank you so much.
Today we are going to kill you off and take a look at the funeral you would plan for yourself. But I wanted to begin by asking you, is your own death something that you think of very often?
No, not really. I don't worry too much about it because I don't feel as if it matters. I think at the end of the day, or the end of your life, if you will, there's not much that affects you because you're dead.
So you don't go through the day worrying?
No,
much at all?
No, I don't. I think if anything, I worry that I am not living life fully enough.
That's a very good outlook. We are going to hear the 5 songs that you have chosen to be played during your funeral. I noticed that your choices all seem to be somewhat related to nature and the seasons, and I want to know more about that. But for now, what is your first song choice?
The first song is a song called Summertime by the Fire Theft. Honestly, I probably couldn't exactly tell you what this song is about, but it's one of the songs that has always given me a lot of just uplifting feelings, driving down the road with the windows down and you're cranking the music and singing along. But I do like the lyrics in here, sort of pointing to this idea of all these people that have come before us and those that, come after us. And I think that when one is thinking about life and about death, those are really poignant thoughts, just considering we are kind of what we make ourselves, and the people that come before us is a big part of that. So I'll carry on, faded rumors that outlive their destiny. Crazy millions have all long since passed and way to the stars, where it shines in the summertime. It's like the veil that hides you and me. Summertime. It's like the veil that hides you from me.
The Fire Theft from their self-titled album, a song called Summertime. Nathanael, you've spoken a little bit in the past about how you were raised. I'm very curious about your upbringing. Where did you grow up?
Yeah, I grew up in southwest Missouri, in Joplin, a fairly small city that has, I guess, recently come into the news for the major tornado that happened there. But grew up, in a fairly conservative family. My parents, or my dad is like a worship pastor, and the youngest of 8 kids, most of them being preachers or missionaries, and his dad being a traveling, preacher and Bible college professor. So that was kind of my background.
Am I correct in saying you were homeschooled?
I was
as a child.
Yeah.
Tell me about that experience.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that it was one of the best things and worst things simultaneously for me. I learned a lot about learning. Being a homeschooled kid, learned how to teach myself anything that I wanted. I was I think instilled with a great love for learning, and that really carried me through. I think has benefited me a lot in my life. And then there were lots of things that I wish were different. Part of the purpose of it, I think, for my parents was to somewhat protect me from the outside world, but in doing that, I also missed out on some things. And fortunately, I wasn't one of those sort of prototypical homeschooled kids who never got any socialization and was super awkward. I think maybe I'm awkward. I don't know, but I like to think that I'm not that awkward. But yeah, I think the combination of developing my skills and educating myself, and just the ability to go at my own pace were incredible.
I think a natural thing to wonder about you, given your passion towards beverages, was coffee around a lot when you were young? Is that where you were introduced to it?
Yeah, 100%. My dad loves coffee. Introduced me to coffee. I remember having my first, sips, like spoonfuls of his coffee with a bunch of cream and sugar in it at some local diner or whatever, and liking it then, even though I didn't, necessarily drink a lot of it. But, my first job really was in a coffee shop, and then I just kind of continued down that path. But it's funny now, coming kind of full circle, now, I'm the one that's bringing things to my dad and showing him stuff, and he gets a kick out of it. It's cool. Yeah.
That's very nice. Let's hear about the second song you've chosen. What is it?
This is Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles, or, perhaps more dear to my heart, George Harrison. When I was putting together this list, I started out kind of thinking about, like, I don't know, but somber songs about death. And I was like, no, that's not what I want. I don't want people to be sad necessarily. I think sadness has its place, but my goal is, to live a full and joyful life. And I think celebrating that is a really wonderful thing. And so I actually tried to pick some like happy songs, and this is one of the happiest ones that I've ever heard.
The Beatles and Here Comes the Sun from their album, Abbey Road. Nathanael, you are certified as a barista by the Barista Guild of America. Mm-hmm. How long ago did this happen?
Oh, gosh. It was their very first training weekend that they did. I think that was 2009 in Raleigh-Durham, I believe is where we had it. So yeah, that was a long time ago.
What went into you actually becoming certified? How does it work?
Yeah, they the Barista Guild of America started this kind of standardized training program that is now under the umbrella of the Specialty Coffee Association. So they years and years ago put together some training weekends, and they would do camps where baristas would go, and they would stay for a few days, and they would go through all of these seminars and learn things and get a bunch of hands-on experience with sort of like giants in the industry. People would fly in and be there to train all these young bucks. It was cool.
You, I think right now, are pretty devoted to educating new baristas.
Mm-hmm.
Did teaching come naturally for you when you started doing that?
Yeah, I think so. A lot of it sort of springs out of a natural passion for something. If you're excited about something and you understand it, then you're usually a pretty good teacher. It was one of the things that I really enjoyed about coffee as I was becoming more and more serious about it. It was actually the first business that I started with my partner Sean. Was a training company that we did, and we worked with a few cafes around town before kind of moving into the later businesses. But yeah.
And I wanted to get to your different coffee shop history. You seem to have worked at all the best coffee shops in Nashville. You began at Bongo Java at the Fido location in Hillsborough Village. And then you worked for a very well-respected cafe, CREMA. Mm-hmm. And there you developed the CREMA Slow Bar. What was that all about?
Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. It was actually inspired by this project that James Hoffman did called Penny University. And James Hoffman was the world barista champion in 2007, where is part owner, I believe, of a company called Square Mile in London, a really fantastic roasting company, and they've had a big presence over the last decade or so. But after he won, he wanted to do this really interesting. I don't know. It was kind of a passion project for him. It was exploratory. He wanted to see how far he could push people to enjoy new things in new contexts, and he was charging more for things than anybody else at the time. But essentially, what it was just a small, maybe 5 or 6 seat, establishment at a bar where folks would come in and they would just brew coffee for them in different ways. It was literally nothing but coffee. But they would pick really unique things, and then they would do them, specific brewing methods that they thought were the best iterations of that. I was really inspired by that, and what we ended up doing was something very similar, where we would generally have like 3 or 4 different coffees that we thought were really special. We would pick a brewing method that we thought highlighted those characteristics the best that they could be, and then we would actually pair it with a small bite of something, an amuse-bouche or something. We didn't have a full kitchen and we weren't chefs, so it wasn't like the catbird seed. But the 2 main people that I was kind of like bouncing things off of was Josh Haberger and Eric, who opened the catbird seat and started the catbird seat. We were working with them a lot as CREMA, and they were coming in every day, so they became good friends of mine, and so they kind of helped me develop this thing. And then we did several iterations of that, where the coffees would change a little bit, and we kind of like pre-sold tickets to it. And so people would come in and sit down for a little while, and we'd give them this whole presentation. Basically, it was about 20, 30 minutes, and it was a lot of fun.
It was at CREMA, I believe, in 2012 where you first developed coffee soda. Mm-hmm. You didn't call it Matchless at first, but when do you think the idea of having carbonated coffee first came into your head? Where did this initiate from?
What I wanted was to be able to drink coffee and have it be even more refreshing than it was. I was, really into doing iced coffee as like an ice brew. So you brew it hot over ice, and that ends up being a lot more vibrant, and it has more available acids in the flavor than like a cold brew does, and it's a lot more refreshing. So I was really interested in the dynamics of that, but I wanted to take it even further to see how much farther I could take it. And really the logical step was effervescence, and I started out doing, some espresso in soda with some other syrups and things like that. And it worked okay. And there's still a lot of people that do that, like as an espresso tonic or something like that. But there's so many issues that happen with it where it's just like, the espresso's hot. So you're losing carbonation because of that. It, dilutes the whole thing. Espresso has kind of like, for lack of a better term, like a muddy flavor. It's not as clean and crisp as like a brewed coffee. And so I played around with a few different versions, and again, kind of bouncing these ideas off of Josh and Eric. Eric didn't believe that I could make anything delicious that way, and but Josh I think gave me a couple of suggestions. One being like, why don't you carbonate the whole thing in this, like what was like they were using in the catbird seat. It was called a Twist and Sparkle, which I think is off the market now because it explodes, and they had to recall it. But so he let me borrow that, and I started playing around with things, and then it eventually just kind of like settled on the simplest possible recipe, just getting all the ingredients out of the way. And letting the coffee shine through. And that ended up being the best, which, is often the case.
Simple.
Yeah.
You have said, quote, as soon as I put the soda on the menu at CREMA, I knew it would be a huge success. Your confidence in the drink is quite impressive. How did you know it was going to be received well?
Man, that's such a funny thing because I remember that experience, and it's hard to describe because it's just one of those moments where like you experience something and not only did you do exactly what you wanted and what was in your brain, but that other people are going to dig it. And there was some sort of like magical moment where it just everything made sense, and I was like, this is going to be great. Everybody's going to love this. I don't think I've ever had quite that moment with another drink.
You next were part of the team that opened Steadfast in Germantown. This was, I think, your first involvement in opening a cafe from the very beginning, correct?
Yeah.
How did you feel after bringing this business to life from nothing?
Oh, it's a huge accomplishment. It's, God, it's so much work. And we didn't know what we were doing half the time. This was the first time, as you said, that we'd done something from the ground up. So there were millions of details that we didn't know how to execute, and it took a lot of like beating our heads against the wall to do things. And thankfully we had some help here and there, but a lot of it was done on our own, and it was a huge learning experience, and we were very proud of the way that it all came together. Very very grateful that the neighborhood responded to it and Nashville responded to it as well as they did. Yeah.
And from that became another location called Steadfast Commons. What was the idea behind that? How was that different than just the Steadfast Cafe?
Yeah, so that was always designed to be a coffee and cocktail bar. And what the reality was that we ended up doing more cocktails than coffee. But it was a sort of bizarre experience because we didn't really necessarily like scout the location out. It kind of came to us, and then we just decided to do it. We brought a friend of mine, Troy Seidel, in, who's been very heavily involved in a lot of really fantastic bars. And he consulted and helped us develop the menu and trained us and all that. So like we were executing drinks at the same level as most of the best places in town, and combining that at the same time with coffee and coffee cocktails. That was the first time that I really explored that realm too, beyond my work at Pinewood. But it was a really fun time. It was a difficult time, and ultimately it didn't end up working out. We had some business disagreements with our partner, and then that didn't end up panning out. So RIP, but but it was fun while it lasted. Yeah.
But I would imagine this led to the idea of creating Stay Golden.
For sure. Yeah, and in a lot of ways Stay Golden is what we wanted to do all along. But we didn't quite have the resources or the know-how to pull off. So, yeah.
We're going to find out more about that. But first, tell me about your third song choice.
Yeah, again, this is kind of going with that sunshine theme, the uplifting song, Mr. Blue Sky. Funny enough, similar to Here Comes the Sun. This is, if you listen to the lyrics, it's like, why did you take so long to come? But I think, there's always that sort of dynamic, that struggle and then the release. And I think in a lot of ways, death can be a release. And certainly for some people who have a lot of pain and suffering in their life, the end can be very welcome.
Hey, you with the pretty face, welcome to the eulogy.
Electric Light Orchestra and Mr. Blue Sky from their album Out of the Blue. Nathanael, you are now one of the partners in Stay Golden, a cafe concept which so far has 2 locations in Nashville on Sidco Drive and then a newer location in East Nashville. I understand the original idea was to have a restaurant that didn't favor coffee over food necessarily, or vice versa, but saw the importance of coffee and food and even cocktails all equally. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, totally. I mean, ultimately, we want to create a space that inspires people, that, you know, they're experiencing wonderful, delicious things, whether that's coffee or whether it's food or whether it's cocktails. Those are all things that we, you know, as partners have been very into in our lives, that we've really loved and have learned a lot about. And so we wanted to share them. Now, granted, we're not so much the food side of things. We have a head chef, Simone Kugueba, and he's fantastic. We are so blessed to have him. But bringing those things together is something that doesn't happen that often in as thoughtful a way as I would like. And so that was kind of our goal.
The look of the Stay Golden interiors is very unique for a coffee shop. It's less traditional, focused on very light-colored walls, pastels, calming colors, almost beachy to a point.
Yeah.
Were you involved in choosing the interior style at all?
I was less involved in that than I had been for Steadfast. Sean actually did a lot of that, and he's actually our roaster. But for both of the architects that we work with for both locations, they had their individual interior designers. Katie Vance with Powell did a fantastic job with the East Nashville location. But I think we had all kind of communicated to one another, like, this is the vibe that we want to put out. You know, we really love the idea of feeling bright and open and airy in the morning while you're enjoying your coffee. I think I would rather sit in a sunlit room, you know, with bright colors all around me. You know, by no means do I think we're entirely unique in that. I think that has been a larger trend across especially the specialty coffee market. You know, there's plenty of other places in town, CREMA being one, you know, nice and light and bright. Barista Parlor, you know, has some really beautiful locations. We're not unique in that. But yeah, it is something that I think we much prefer. I think they've even done scientific studies and found that people enjoy their coffee more when they are in a bright environment. So for whatever that's worth.
Yeah. Do you feel like your sense of what adventurous flavor combinations will work has gotten better as you come up with more and more drinks?
I think, you know, the more that you practice anything, the better you get at it. And what I really love is kind of like finding new ways to construct things and asking, like, well, why do we have to do it this way? Flavors in coffee are, you know, somewhat limited because coffee is such a strong dominant flavor and not everything goes with it, but more goes with it than you would expect. I think what I've really loved is doing things like the coffee soda, where you take coffee and then you put it in a new context. The first time a lot of people have coffee soda, they're so confused by it that they don't know whether they like it or not. You know, there's probably a good, you know, 30% of people who have it for the first time and they're like, what? Ew. Wait.
It takes a moment.
Yeah.
To set in. Is that your favorite part of all this, the new creations that you can come up with?
Yeah, I think so. I'm the sort of person who's always looking for something else. Who's always, you know, it's not that I'm dissatisfied. It's just that I'm so interested in all of the things. So I want to be stimulated. I want to move on. I want to look somewhere else. Mm-hmm.
Let's hear about the fourth song you've chosen. Tell me about it.
Sure. This is Claire de Lune by Debussy. This is one of my all-time favorite pieces, and it reminds me a lot of my grandmother. She was a piano player, taught me how to play piano when I was maybe like 5 or 6 when I started learning. And she always really loved this song. So in terms of like a more somber kind of like reflective mood, this is where I went.
Clair de Lune, composed by Claude Debussy, performed by Seung Chin Cho. Stay Golden's second location in East Nashville is doing quite well. Are there thoughts of a third location opening?
Yeah, I think, have our hopes for sure. We would definitely like to expand the brand and grow it and do multiple locations. We, in fact, had initially planned on doing a third one. And then once the first two were open, we thought better of it and pulled the brakes just because it's so much work to do. I mean, 2 in like 6 months is insane. I don't know why we ever did that, but yeah, I think once we kind of catch our breath a little bit, hopefully, and get a little bit more momentum, then we'll go that route.
I see. Before we hear your final song choice, I believe you have chosen to resurrect a recently passed author to deliver your eulogy. Tell me about this man.
Yeah, Christopher Hitchens is very near and dear to my heart. He was one of, I think, my biggest influences in terms of changing my view of the world and how I understand it. But beyond that, he was also a fantastic orator, really so well-spoken and just a pleasure to listen to. He really enjoyed speaking and debates, and he was a journalist and just an incredibly intelligent and poetic man.
Is there anything specific that you would like for him to read?
Yeah, so another one of my heroes, Carl Sagan, was talking about a death and kind of our desire for life to exist on the other side of it. So this is a quote from him. "The world is so exquisite, with so much love and moral depth, that there is no reason to deceive ourselves with pretty stories for which there is little good evidence. Far better, it seems to me, in our vulnerability, is to look death in the eye and to be grateful every day for the brief but magnificent opportunity that life provides."
Nathanael, we've come to your fifth and final funeral song. What is it?
This is Waltz of the Flowers by Tchaikovsky.
And what does this song mean to you? Why would you like this to be at the end of your fantasy funeral?
Yeah, it's such a beautiful, dynamic, and triumphant song. I love the crescendo at the end, but the way that it builds towards it with the harps in the beginning, it's so delicate, but then it comes through and it has so much depth and power. And, speaking to your thoughts earlier about this theme of nature and the sun and the moon and then the flowers, I really identify very, very closely with nature. It means a lot to me. This song reminds me of my grandfather, who was a gardener, his whole life, in addition to a lot of other things, including being a really fantastic artist. But his influence and his appreciation for nature really worked its way into every fiber of my being. And now I think understanding more about nature than I ever knew as a child, and just understanding how we're all connected and how life and death is basically this ongoing process, and everything is working together in that process. I just think it's such a beautiful picture of that.
Tchaikovsky's Waltz of the Flowers, Nathanael Mehrens' final fantasy song choice. Nathanael, perhaps in keeping with this idea of truly being outside, have you thought about what you would like to happen to your body after you die?
Yeah, I mean, I think beyond getting as much use as possible out of it in any way that science can, and helping somebody else, I would love to be sent into space. Orbit would be cool, but ultimately I think it would be just a fantastic and the most fitting end to just be shot straight into the sun.
Do you picture it there being perhaps a ceremony where everyone stands around and watches the one last time they see you as you are shot?
I think it would be hard not to. Yeah, I would do it. I would watch it.
This has been really great. Thank you for taking us through your fantasy funeral.
It's been my pleasure.
My Fantasy Funeral is brought to you by We Own This Town. Full versions of the songs chosen today can be heard on our Spotify playlist. Find out more at myfantasyfuneral.show. I'm Ryan Breegle. Thank you for listening.